Hi friends, I hope this brief video finds you doing well. I know we all have a lot on our plate right now, and one of the last things you probably want reminding of is that it's annual review season. I know sometimes that feels like an afterthought in the midst of all that we have going on, but it's helpful that we stop and pause for a moment and recognize that conducting annual reviews is an important part in the professional development of our individual staff, and it's also important and critical to the health of our overall organization. So I want to take a few moments to share with you some of the basic principles that we want to employ in student affairs as we conduct those annual reviews. And to that end, I'm particularly indebted to the feedback that so many of you provided through our climate assessment survey in student affairs that was conducted last spring, and also the ongoing work of our climate assessment working group and the recommendations that they shared with leadership earlier this past semester. Let me start by saying that it's an expectation in student affairs that every supervisor provide accurate and honest assessments of an employee's performance in accordance with the definitions provided in accompanying the 3-point rating scale. We use 3 different ratings, as you'll recall: not meeting expectations, meeting expectations, and exceeding expectations. And each of those definitions provides additional detail about when and how they should be used. Now, let me stress that assigning a rating of meeting expectations is not a negative review. It indicates that an employee is consistently and continuously performing the expectations of their position throughout the course of the year. However, in appropriate instances, supervisors may consider using a rating of exceeds expectations, and they should do that consistent with the definition for that particular rating. Supervisors should not apply such a rating simply across the board, but neither should they categorically refuse to use a rating of exceeds expectations, especially if that's what's been merited by the employee's performance. To my mind, the key is that every rating that we assign should be rooted in a consistent and considered assessment of an employee's individual performance over the course of the year. I also want to acknowledge that if an employee believes that a performance rating is unfair, then they have certain grievance rights that are secured to them in various HR policies. Grievance policies are in place not only for the protection of the individual employee, but also to ensure the integrity of the grievance process as well as the performance rating process. And we want to make sure that those policies can be exercised without limitation. So I want to be clear that it's an expectation in student affairs that no employee should be discouraged from exercising the rights they have under any applicable grievance policy, and no form of retaliation will be tolerated. It is critically important that our employees feel as though those policies work for and in support of them. Finally, many or perhaps even most of you have already completed the training offered by our HR professionals with respect to conducting performance reviews. If you haven't done that, I strongly encourage you to complete that as soon as possible. We all have a collective responsibility to be good supervisors and to know and be able to learn more about how we can conduct effective and encouraging performance reviews. So please complete that training if you haven't already done so, and utilize the skills that you learn in conducting your reviews. I want to close by again just thanking all of you for the hard work that you're doing. This is an extraordinarily busy time, and I know that this can sometimes feel like one more thing to do, but it really is vitally important, and each of our employees will benefit from the strength of the reviews that we're able to provide and the honest constructive feedback that will be contained in those reviews. So thank you for your good work, and I look forward to chatting with you soon. Bye-bye.
Hello, my name is Barbara Lassane, and I'm the Senior HR Director in Student Affairs. I want to talk to you about the annual appraisal process, but before getting into that, I'd like to talk a little bit about performance management. What is performance management? Michael Armstrong describes performance management as the continuous process of improving performance by setting individual and team goals which are aligned to the strategic goals of the organization, planning performance to achieve the goals, reviewing and assessing progress, and developing the knowledge, skills, and abilities of people. One of the key points that Mr. Armstrong makes in his definition is that performance management is a continuous process That means it starts from the beginning of the evaluation period until the end of the evaluation period. Sometimes we tend to get more focused on just the annual appraisal part of performance management and not the actual totality of performance management. The overall success of our university relies on the individual accomplishments of all of its staff. The university has a performance management program in place for both its SHRA and EHRA employees. This performance management program allows for communicating performance expectations and evaluating the achievements of its employees. This approach helps to ensure that employees are performing efficiently throughout the year, and in the process, any issues that arise along the way can be addressed regarding an employee's performance. All permanent university employees, both SHRA and EHRA, are evaluated annually on their performance. Here in Student Affairs, both SHRA and EHRA employees are evaluated on institutional goals. The institutional goals are expertise, accountability, customer-oriented, team-oriented, compliance and integrity, and supervision for those employees that have supervisory responsibilities. Supervisors create 3 to 5 individual goals for each of their employees, and they provide clarity on what level of performance constitutes meeting those expectations. Supervisors are required to provide an annual overall performance rating that represents the supervisor's assessment of the employee's total performance during the entire performance cycle. This rating is based on a 3-point scale of exceeding expectations, meeting expectation, or not meeting expectation. Please continue to listen to this valuable training document that's been put together to provide support to supervisors and employees doing the performance evaluation process. There will be helpful information that will help guide you along the way. Thank you.
Greetings, and thank you for taking time to view the performance review training presentation for Student Affairs. If you attended the training sessions earlier this spring, you are aware that the information in the training sessions applied to both SHRA and EHRA performance reviews. However, there are a few differences between the review processes, and I wanted to take some time to share the similarities and differences. I'm going to share my screen and display a slide deck with more specific information. Several years ago, we revised the performance review process and forms in Student Affairs. At that time, the EHRA form was changed to model the SHRA evaluation form. The Student Affairs EHRA evaluation template has been recently provided in an email from Barbara Lassane and is also available from your respective HR representative. There are some slight differences between SHRA and EHRA review timeframes. Due to the COVID effect this year, the SHRA review period has been extended to June 30th. SHRA reviews should be completed during the month of July, and the review needs to be signed and reported by August 31st. The EHRA review period is the same as previous years, with the review period ending June 30th. EHRA reviews should be completed during the month of July, and the review needs to be signed and reported by July 31st. One of the differences between EHRA and SHRA reviews is the weighting of each goal. The SHRA review process requires a weighting, whereas the weighting for the EHRA review is optional. Although the rating criteria of not meeting, meeting, and exceeding are the same for both EHRA and SHRA employees, the rating criteria for SHRA employees requires a numerical score. Please note that the numerical score needs to be a whole number. Also note that the SHRA employees receive an overall final rating as a total score and then translates to the overall rating of not meeting, meeting, or exceeding. For EHRA employees, since there is no weighting or score, the overall final rating is based on a mode of the individual scores. The mode is the most common rating that occurs throughout the evaluation, and the chart provides several examples. Please note that if one of the individual goals is rated as not meeting, the overall rating cannot be exceeding, as shown in example 4. Another difference between EHRA and SHRA reviews is the appeal process. SHRA employees may appeal an overall rating of not meeting expectations. However, please note that individual ratings of not meeting are not eligible for appeal. There is not an appeal process for EHRA employees. Instead, the EHRA employees who have concerns should contact your respective HR representative or Barbara Lassane, Senior HR Director for Student Affairs. Employees also have the option to contact a member of UNC's Employee and Management Relations team. Finally, supervisors of SHRA employees are required to complete a competency assessment form, whereas this form is not applicable for the EHRA review process. As for similarities between the two processes, the expectations and requirements in the training session applies to both EHRA and SHRA performance reviews. Other elements that are the same include the rating criteria of not meeting, meeting, and exceeding, the institutional goals, and the talent development plan for all employees in student affairs that includes participating in an activity that will broaden the knowledge and skills in the areas of equity, inclusion, and accessibility. We hope you find the information in the training session helpful, and special thanks to Tyler Enlow, Senior Employee and Management Relations Consultant with UNC Human Relations, for sharing his time and expertise in the training sessions for employees and supervisors in student affairs.
Just so everybody knows that we will be speaking on SHRA employees, not EHRA non-faculty. However, if you have an EHRA non-faculty question, I will answer what I can. I do not run that program, so just FYI.
So welcome everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us. We do have a number of folks in the room who are appropriately social distancing, and we hope that everybody who has joined us remotely is doing well, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I want to start off by first acknowledging some of the individuals who have really worked to make this presentation possible, including Chris Williams, who's the Director of Student Affairs IT, Rebecca Chang, who is helping us with some of our technology on site here, and also a member of SAIT, Barbara Lassane, who is our Director of Student Affairs HR, and all of our HR associates that are in the different hubs. So I just want to acknowledge all of their extra work in order to help prepare for these presentations. I'll introduce Tyler Enlow in a minute, and then he will take the program from there. He did mention that this is a primarily SHRA presentation. I want to acknowledge also that a couple of years ago, more than a couple of years now, we actually synchronized our SHRA and EHRA evaluation process. So the forms are very much the same. The evaluation criteria is very much the same with the three overall ratings of meeting, not meeting, and exceeding. There are some differences between EHRA and SHRA, and so we'll mention those as we go through this presentation today. And again, Tyler mentioned if you do have any questions, we're happy to take those either from individuals in the room, or if you want to text your message, we'll then reply as we get those messages in. Barbara looks like she wants to say something, so I'm going to allow her to say something for a minute here.
Just want to let everybody know that we will be providing EHRA specific evaluation instructions. As Dr. Payne has stated, the evaluation forms have been, the EHRA evaluation form has been modeled to resemble the SHRA form. It's a different time period. Of course, the EHRA evaluation period is from June 1st.
July 1st.
July 1st to June 30th, thank you. And also but the institutional goals have been incorporated into the EHRA form, and we will be able to follow along, and Tyler will provide information regarding, how those are to be evaluated and what have you. But like I said, there will be instruction following closer to the end of the EHRA non-faculty evaluation period. Have not determined if that will be Zoom, by Zoom only, or in person at this time, but there will be instruction. And if you have any questions about the EHRA non-faculty process, please reach out to your departmental HR representative who can help you answer, questions you may have before the actual instruction and training occurs. Thank you.
Question. So if I hear both of you correctly, this is for SHRA.
So I think there's an opportunity to provide some clarification here that the information that Tyler is going to be sharing regarding some of the rating procedures, the things that we're looking for, that we're providing instructions for supervisors, it applies to SHRA and EHRA staff.
Okay, that's the thing.
There's no difference in our evaluation process.
Yeah.
Okay.
All employees are treated the same, and so I think that's important to understand. There are a few nuances between the two, and we'll try to acknowledge those. But the information that Tyler is going to provide for you today, with the exceptions that we'll acknowledge, is the same for all supervisors, EHRA and SHRA. So thank you for that opportunity to clarify. If you have additional questions, please feel free to either ask or send them through. Again, I'm going to introduce Tyler because I think we have a pretty full session today. We do want to get to your questions if you have them. I want to acknowledge that this presentation and these sessions are a result of the feedback that you have provided in student affairs. All of our employees had an opportunity to participate in the climate assessment survey that was done almost a year ago now, and this was one of the things, some of the feedback that came out of those sessions was how important it was for supervisors to have some touch point before we begin the evaluation process. The thing that we've done is we've went above that and we've invited all employees in student affairs to participate so that all employees can hear the same thing that the supervisors are receiving in their training. And I hope that that is something that you will feel has been very responsive to the feedback that we've received in terms of this important exercise that we do. It doesn't happen just one time a year, although we have an annual performance review. As Tyler will mention, this process should be an ongoing process throughout the year where supervisors are providing feedback and employees have an opportunity to also engage with their supervisors in terms of expectations and a touch point in terms of how performance is going. So I'll stop there and I'll introduce Tyler, and I really appreciate the opportunity for Tyler to be here and take his time. I know he's joined by an individual from HR as well, so I'll let Tyler take it from here and do any other introductions.
Good afternoon. 4:15 on a Thursday afternoon. I'm sure everybody's stoked to hear about performance management, but my name's Tyler Enlow. I'm a Senior Employee and Management Relations Consultant in the Office of Human Resources. I am assigned to, one of the departments I am assigned to work with is Student Affairs. I am also the university's SHRA Performance Management Coordinator. And with me is Adele Mayfield, who is also a Senior Employee and Management Relations Consultant. And she also is now my backup for PM. So if you have a question, you can't get a hold of me, Adele is always there to help out. So, we're bringing along all the training. She'll start jumping in here, I'm sure, soon, right? All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a few things when it comes to performance management. We're going to talk about reviews, we're going to talk about performance plans, we're going to talk about goals, we're going to talk about institutional goals. But what we also want to talk about is take it all the way back. Why do we even do this? Now, the question I often get is if it's not for money, why do we even care about doing performance reviews? Well, performance reviews actually interact with a lot of different processes in HR that you don't know about maybe until you go to reclassify a position, you go to give a raise, you try and do a disciplinary action. Then we start seeing, okay, it does intertwine with everything. But the first thing is I want to make sure that everybody kind of understands this. When we talk about the philosophy of the system, performance management system, it is not a gotcha system. It is not a chance to talk about the last 10 years, okay? It is a year-to-year performance evaluation of how an employee has performed to your expectations. And we'll get into more of that in a minute. But it is a communication system to help the employee succeed. It's a communication system, right? As Dr. Payne had eloquently stated, it's not a once-a-year thing. It is a all-the-year thing, okay? It is a chance for you to have constant communication so that the employee is aware of exactly how they're performing at any moment. It's also a chance to help the employee succeed. Everybody in here is either a manager, we're all employees, right? It's easy to hire people, right? It's cheap to go through and hire new people, train them, right? Put money into the position. It's not cheap. So it's easier to have somebody succeed because you have a business need for the employee to do the job, or you wouldn't have a position. We are in the state system, right? Everybody with me so far? So it's easier to help the employee to succeed. One word you're going to hear a lot from me, clarity. Clear. Be clear in what the job expectations are and in what the job duties are. So let me walk you through something. Can you be clear in what the expectations of the job are without being clear in what the job duties are? No. You got to be clear in what the job duties are, and then how well you're supposed to do it. And then you evaluate based on that. So one thing I'm also going to be clear about, myself, is that the job duties of the position are tied to the what of the job, the job description. Okay? The job description tells the what of the job. And how well the employee is supposed to do that is the performance plan. So when we talk about roles and responsibilities of employees, the first thing that jumps out is actively participate and own the work. When I say own the work, what does that mean? The group of few in here. Put everybody on the spot. When I say own the work, you start thinking of terms like autonomy, right? Responsibility of the job, right? Knowledge, subject matter experts. Those things all come up because to own the work, you know all aspects of it. You need to be autonomous so that you, the supervisor, don't have to tell them every single day what exactly they're supposed to do. Okay? It's also the employee's responsibility to ask questions. Anybody in here a mind reader? Okay, trick question, none of you all are. Even if you're thinking about raising your hand, you're not. Mind readers don't exist. So, how as a supervisor is supposed to know that an employee is not aware or know or have knowledge of something without the employee asking questions? Another thing is keeping supervisors informed. From time to time, We all face impediments to our job, correct? It can be a lot of different things. But it's our responsibility to make sure that our supervisors know that the reason why this did not get completed was because of this impediment to my performance. But it's also important that that happens prior to the deadline, right? Keeping people informed in a timely manner is another way of putting it. Because if you just come up to right to the deadline and be like, yeah, well, see what happened was 2 weeks ago, no, that's not going to work, right? Supervisors, be clear in expectations and honest in the appraisal. I do that. Anybody's taken a course with me before, and I do a lot of PM courses here at the university. When I'm going to walk you through an ask and answers, okay? If the employee is meeting expectations, what do I expect to see on the evaluation? Come on. Meeting expectations. If the employee is not meeting expectations, what do I expect to see? Not meeting expectations. And if the employee is exceeding expectations, what do I expect to see? The reason why I'm asking this, it seems redundant. Why is Tyler asking this? It's because we do not have a quota system. Okay? This is not in comparison to each other. Okay? If the employee has met the expectations that you, the supervisor, have set and been clear about, then you have to be honest in the appraisal that the employee meets expectations. If the employee has exceeded the expectations that you were clear in, then I expect you to be honest as a supervisor and mark them exceeding. And if the employee is not meeting expectations, I expect to see that as well. Okay? And here's one thing I always make sure I state. Now, for SHRA, it's different from EHRA. SHRA can grieve a not meeting expectation overall. That is all. That's the only thing that's grievable. EHRA cannot grieve their reviews. Okay? Just FYI. So, you can't be scared of that. Okay? If the employee's not meeting, they're not meeting. I used to tell a story when I was at a previous institution where I had a person who may or may not have been a faculty member came up to me and said, this employee's been the worst employee I've had the last three years. I want him gone. I want him fired. I want him gone today. I said, okay, once you get him calmed down, why don't you provide me the last 3 years worth of performance reviews? I always like to do 3, because you can see an anomaly in there. You can see if it's a pattern. Even if the person's meeting expectation, there might be something in the verbiage, right, in the comments that leads you to believe this has been an ongoing issue. What do you think was on their evaluation? Exceeding. Well, there it was outstanding. But yeah, it was exceeding expectations, basically. And so I'm reading it, and I'm reading how this employee is essentially the best employee he's got. And yet I'm hearing him say, this is the worst employee I've got. Something's not adding up. Somebody was not honest in what their appraisal should have been. Either one way or the other. Either they're lying to me, or they're lying to me on paper. It's one of the two. That's all I got to go on. I'm not there. Okay? And another thing is we talk about investing time up front. You have to invest time up front. So we're talking about being clear in the expectations, writing good goals. Okay, and we're going to talk about writing goals in a minute. But you have to invest the time up front. If you don't, you're going to invest a lot of time on the back end. I promise you that. Because grievances are not quick and they're not fun. Okay, so one way or another, it always seems to end up in our lap. So, second level, anybody in here a second level supervisor? There are probably some in the chat room. Anybody here? Well, Dr. Payne, yes, you are, yes. A second level supervisor is anybody who supervises supervisors. All right? It is required that second level supervisors review and sign all performance plans and all performance reviews. Now, performance plans, you can take it to the employee, get the employee to sign, then take it to the second level. If that's your process, that's fine, as long as everybody's in agreement. Reviews. Please give the reviews to the second level supervisor prior to them going to the employee. Reason being, and I'm going to use, because they're both in the room, Dr. Payne and Barbara. So Barbara reports to Dr. Payne. Barbara has people who report to her. Okay, so if Barbara were to deliver a performance evaluation to one of her employees, before Dr. Payne sees it, he gets to sign it and doesn't necessarily agree with one of the ratings. He thinks it should be, we'll just go lower in this case because it's actually kind of the conversation. If he says it needs to be higher or lower, guess who's going to win out on that? Generally the second level supervisor. Not always, but generally. So in that case, Barbara now has to go back to her employee and deliver it again. And if that first conversation wasn't contentious enough, guess what's going to happen when she comes with a lower score? That's not going to be fun. So that's why it's always best to get to the second level supervisor ahead of time so that they can review it before you give it to the employee. It also sends a bad message to the employees that we're not on the same page, which is a problem as well. Any questions about that? Third level supervisor is usually for quality or consistency control. Oftentimes, third level supervisors might be pretty high up, and it may not be, it happens. But their main goal is making sure that the goals are rated or reviewed consistently across the whole of their department. So the appraisal itself. The cycle ends for SHRA March 31st. It's April 1st, March 31st. Appraisals are due April 30th. Let me be clear. If anybody goes online and looks at because this is a system policy, this is the same process and policy for every institution in the UNC system. The system allows 60 days for reviews. We have gone to them and asked for an earlier deadline and been granted that. That's why ours is 30. Partly that is because of the sheer size of this university. And I have to run down those ratings and get those to system office by that deadline. And so this university is not great at being 100%. One of these days, I'm going to exceed expectations and get all 100% on time. Doubt it, but I'm hopeful. So that's why our deadline is April 30th. Now, departments can set an even earlier deadline than that.
And we do.
And okay, there we go.
You'll receive a notification with the instructions that the due date for the appraisals to be entered into Connect Carolina is prior to April 30th. I can't have the date say April 30th because that's the date it is due to be in Connect Carolina for OHR to transmit up to the system office. So it can't be the date that I get 1,000 emails. I'm going to be meeting with my person this afternoon, and I'll get it in on May 1st or May 2nd. So the April 30th is the date for it to be entered, the score. And you need to meet with the employee, go over the performance review, and as Tyler has stated, have your second level be in agreement and so that you can meet the deadline of having the actual score in by April 30th. So I just want to clarify that because people see April 30th and then that'll be the first day someone will actually pick up the form to see what's going on. So we just have to have an earlier date due so that we can meet the system office requirements for reporting.
And one thing that Barbara brings up, I want to make sure I state, you do have to meet with the employees. It's later in the slides as well, because I have to actually state that. I get asked that question every year. Yes, you do have to meet with the employees. Second of all, you need to meet with them prior to this date. Why? Because if you enter the rating in Connect Carolina, hit complete, the employee can now see it. There's no stopping that. There's no buffer time. Once you hit complete, it's there, and they can see it. And they need to know what that is prior to it going in the system. Remember, we're talking about clarity, honesty, all that. Let's make sure we're doing that, all right? Now, I also want to make a note here. This is supposed to cover the totality of the employee's work for the entire performance year. Remember, I said this is not a chance to cover the last 5 years of the employee's performance. It's the last year. It's also, because we talked about some biases, it's not recency bias. It's not the last 3 months. It's not primacy bias. It's not the first 3 months of the cycle. It covers the totality of the work. And then anybody in here ask for a self-evaluation? Nobody? You can. Go, Dr. Fain, again. You can ask for a self-evaluation. We do one for our department. You can ask for one. But what you ask of one person, you ask of everyone. Okay? Our boss didn't come to us and say, Adele, you don't have to do one, but Tyler, you have to do a self-evaluation. We all did one. Okay? It also suggests that the supervisor provide the employee with the appraisal in advance. Why do you think that? First of all, everybody reads at different speeds, right? There's nothing worse than you giving somebody a piece of paper and then having to sit and watch them read. Is that a good use of anybody's time? Probably not. Second of all, it's contentious initially. Anytime you go in there, it's always going to be some sort of nervousness going on. And if an employee just thinks, I do this too, I get nervous, I go in there, and if I had to read it on the spot, I'd probably miss some things. It may make me feel some type of way if I miss it, all right? So give it to the employee in advance so that they can read it in the privacy of their own place. Here's another thing. This is, like I said, this is not a gotcha system. This should not be the first time the employee is aware of deficiencies at all. This should have been something, if the employee is deficient, the employee has been spoken to and talked to and had counseling sessions, potentially disciplinary action if we get to that. The employee should be aware of that, how well they've been doing or how poor they've been doing. However, that being said, there is something I like to call sticker shock, which is actually seeing it on an official university form. That happens. It can cause a visceral reaction, okay, which means that that employee now wads it up, throws it in the trash can, gets up, storms off. That can happen. One thing I do want to note is if you start feeling like that's going on, either as an employee or as a manager, you can ask for, hey, can we just take a 5-minute break? Okay, can I go get some water, go use the restroom, splash some water on my face, calm down, go take a walk, and then we'll come back and finish that. That's fine. It's better to do that than have a situation where we're now dealing with a performance deficiency, potentially, and a conduct deficiency, or a conduct problem. We don't want to do that. As much as we can, we don't want to have that happen. So that's why we suggest that. Now, the employee must have worked for the state for at least 6 months to receive an annual appraisal. For the state, for at least 6 months. Okay? That does not mean for student affairs. That does not mean for the Carolina Union. That does not mean as a business services coordinator at the Journey level. That just means as an SHRA employee for at least 6 months to receive an annual appraisal. Okay? So it could have been a transfer from DHHS or from DPS or from DOT, any one of those places, or NC State, App State, any. Okay? Now the appraisal itself. Remember what I said about being clear in expectations. The employee is rated on the expectations you, the supervisor, set for them, not any other measure. It's based on the expectations that you set. Okay? And I am being very clear. I'll put this up there. I love you. Avoid nitpicking. I have literally seen on a performance evaluation, the employee was late twice this year. And that was not in a positive tense. Avoid nitpicking. It will only make that relationship you have with your employees, it'll strain it. It's not a good thing. It'll then lead them to believe, why am I being nitpicked? So be very careful with that. And we say use more observation, concrete, less inferences, because we do use, like our supervisor goes out and talks to our clients. So may send an email to Barbara and say, how has Tyler done with you this year? Those type of things, and uses those type of relationships to garner information on my performance. But also, if you're aware of this deficiency, you probably should be coming by, right, as a supervisor and using your own observations. Okay? So we want to use that as much as possible. You can use other ways, but we want to use your own personal observations more than anything else. Emphasize work above and below. Why is that? Because we want to emphasize this. I'm pointing up for people in the computer who can't see me. All right, we want to emphasize above. Like, keep doing that, right? You're exceeding. That's what we need. But if it's down here, and I'm pointing towards the floor, if they're not meeting expectations, then those are deficiencies that we have to get fixed, right? We can't allow that to continue because this is, over time, is costing the state, costing the university, costing student affairs money or performance or whatever might be going on. Can't allow that to continue. So we want to emphasize that. And this major question I want you to ask yourself, what's driving this rating? What is behind this? Please do not let it be an illegal thing. Please do not. What is driving this rating? And then you give a general write-up of how they've met the expectations. Just general wrap-up comments. And once again, yes, you do have to have a one-on-one with the employee. One thing I do want to mention here is if the employee is not meeting expectations, receives any rating of not meeting expectations, all right, any rating, then you need to have a corrective action plan. How are we going to take this employee from deficiency to proficiency? And that needs to be written in the comments section. And then what you do is you copy and paste that out, and you put it in the developmental goals section of the next year's performance plan. Yes, sir.
Tyler, you might be getting to this, or I might have missed it, but could you also talk about how, I mean, you pretty eloquently give an example of how sometimes evaluations are compared against another individual. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, typically I wait till the bias part, but thank you, Dr. Payne. I can definitely talk about that. So let me give you an example.
You can leave it.
We're going to talk about comparative bias real quick. And this sometimes can happen, specifically in groups where there are like positions, where you have multiple people doing the same job, okay? I have on accounting, housekeeping's another big one. I'm looking at Short's housekeeping. Also, I work with Division of Comparative Medicine. So we have a lot of people who do animal cage wash, and a lot of people who do a lot of things like that, okay? So the example is, let's say that our supervisor, Adele, and our supervisor is Donna James Whitby, who's our manager. Let's say Donna sets meets expectation at 10 of X. Whatever X may be, it's 10 of that, okay? Exceeding expectation is 15 of X. Everybody follow me so far? Doesn't matter what X is, just 15 of it. All right, so Adele and I both have the same job, we're both senior consultants, right? And Adele is better at basically everything than I am, which is true. And so Adele does 19 of X. So remember we said what was exceeding? 15. She did 19. That's exceeding, right? A++, which is what she usually would do. So then I come in, and I do 15 of X. What was exceeding expectations? 15. Supervisor looks at it and said, Adele is better than Tyler. So Adele gets exceeding, and I get meeting expectations. Is that right? The one guy shaking his head, no. No, it's not right. Because what can happen is people, and managers, and I see this a lot, well, not a lot, but I see it, you see it a lot more at different institutions, where managers start looking at two employees and say, well, this person is clearly better than that person, A versus B. But what happens is that I'm not rated based upon my performance compared to Adele's. I may not know Adele did 19 of X. I may not know that that's the new bar. All I know is I was told 15 of X gets me exceed, and that's what I want to do, so that's what I do. So I should be rated exceeding expectation because I am being rated against the expectations that you, the supervisor, set, that what Donna set, okay? It's not about Adele. It's about me and my performance based on those expectations. What can happen then is if I see that and I look at that 15X and I say, I'm clearly exceeding expectations, but I got to meet. Oh, my colleague over here got exceeds. What's the difference between her and I? What's different about us? Because then immediately I'm going to start saying there's something that's not right. And that's when you get yourself in even more trouble. Okay? So don't do that. But thank you, Dr. Perez. I always like to bring up that example to kind of walk through it because it's easy to get into well, this person's better than that person, this person's better than this person. It's not about that. It's all about what you, the supervisor, set. Any questions about that? Okay. So, I stole this from Dr. Payne and Barbara in one of the slides they gave me, but I like this slide because it kind of boils down exactly when we talk about not meeting, and exceeding. Not meeting is consistently not meeting the expectations. Meeting is consistently meeting the expectation, and exceeding is consistently exceeding expectations. Exceeding expectations is not, oh, the week of April 15th, I'm going to exceed the expectations, and that's it. No, it's not a one-time thing. It's a consistency behind that, okay? It's not one-off. It's not two-off. It's consistently going above and beyond, or consistently failing, or failing so bad at one time that we have to go down a disciplinary path, which is a whole other thing. All right? So, scoring. Institutional goals and individual goals are rated a 1, a 2, or a 3. 3 being exceeds, 2 being meets, 1 being not meeting expectations. You do not have the option to do anything other than that. You cannot give an employee a 2.5 because they were almost exceeding, but they were, I got to give them a 2.5 because they were very good. Very good is gone. We do not have that rating anymore. It's a 1, a 2, or a 3. That is it for the individual and institutional goals. Okay? So then that translates when you multiply it by the weighting, it will then give you a decimal number, okay? What I'm only talking about is the rating that you put down on the paper that you multiply against the weighting. It's either 1, 2, or 3. If we see that that's not done properly, guess what again you get to do? Do it again. Because we have the issue where I see a 2.5, and I have seen this across campus, which is why I'm hammering it home right now. If I see a 2.5, I'm going to say, is it a 2 or is it a 3? You got to make a decision. And guess what? If it's not a 3, the employee's going to be upset. So just FYI, that's why we don't want to go down that path. A 1, 2, or 3. Yes, sir.
So just a point here about the difference between SHRA and EHRA, and I'll refer to the experts in the room. But for both the EHRA and SHRA evaluation forms, the institutional goals and individual goals and this differentiation of exceeding, meeting, and not meeting is the same. It's consistent in how we're doing those ratings. What's not consistent between the two forms is the percentage. On EHRA forms,
there's no weighting.
there is no weighting. Or the supervisor has the option to do weighting along with working with the employee. So that's a differentiation because the weighting on SHRA forms results in an overall number, a quantitative number, that then assigns the overall meeting, not meeting, or exceeding. That's not the same in EHRA, but I just want to stress that everything else that Tyler has mentioned is the same. So if there are any questions about that differential, please ask.
So the final rating, a 2.7 to 3.0 is exceeding expectations. A 1.7 to 2.69 is meeting expectations. And a 1.0 to 1.69 is not meeting expectations. You will see a nice little asterisk next to that exceeding expectations because it is statistically possible for an employee to receive a not meeting expectation on 1 or 2 goals, right, and still be at 2.7 or higher. If that is true, the employee, by state policy, cannot receive an exceeding expectation overall. And it's the same if they have a disciplinary action as well. The reason being is the state reasoning behind this, and you can agree with it or not, it's still going to happen, is that an employee must at least meet all aspects of their job to have exceeded their job. There can't be any holes, essentially. They must at least meet everything to then receive exceeding. Any questions about that? Had a few questions in our previous session about that, but I want to make sure I at least, I get if you don't agree with it, I can understand that. However, this is the policy.
I do have to understand I've never done SHRA, but I just want to make sure I understand because a few minutes ago you were saying it has to be a 1, 2, or 3, not 2.5.
Right.
So the final overall, okay.
So what that means is, I just use it to illustrate it a little better. This, and everybody who's online, I'm pointing to compliance and integrity under rating, the number 2. That's what I mean by 1, 2, or 3. Once it's multiplied by the weight, you'll get a 0.2.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. And I get never having done it, and you're like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. What's he talking about? And sometimes I wonder what I'm talking about, but I get it. All right, so if all things are equal for SHRA, where everything's rated at 10%, what you'll have is the difference between exceeding and meeting expectations is actually a 0.1 is the difference between the two of them. I do also want to point out that the minimum percentage that you can have is 5%. No lower. Do not put on there, as you remember that rating I just said, do not put a 5.5%. Don't do it. First of all, it makes it a whole lot harder to calculate. 2, let's just go whole number integers, please. Please, thank you. All right, so I did want to make sure I stated that as well. Any questions about that? All right. And as we talked about rating bias, as Dr. Payne liked to talk about comparative first, remember we talked about primacy, things that happen at the beginning of the year, the performance year. Recency, everybody has heard about recency bias, I'm sure. We talk about the press loves to throw that one around. Then you have leniency bias, which is rating people at a higher rating than they're supposed to have. Severity, the opposite, right? Rating people lower than they should. We sometimes hear that every once in a while when we say, nobody can get and exceeds expectations. That's not how we operate, all right? Everybody should know, and we'll get to that in a minute. Actually, I'll hold off on that comment. Normative bias is rating everybody the same, ignoring differences. Once again, everybody meets expectations. That's it. Done. And comparative is, once again, as we talked about, comparing two people. There's a full list of these in our manager toolkit, which I suggest reading, because first thing is you got to look at it and say, do I have a bias? Do I put more weight on the last 3 months? Okay, maybe I do that. How can I combat that? Well, maybe I don't remember everything that happened at the beginning of the cycle. I can't remember what I did last week. Okay, so what you need to do then is have a Word document where you write down all the kudos the employee got, or the negative things that may happen, or the trainings that they went to, the trainings that they led, the things that happened. Just keep a running list of it so that at the end of the cycle you can look at it and give equal weight. Okay, that's just an example. So, probationary employees. Anybody got probationary employees in here? Maybe? Yeah. Yes, probationary employees, they're within their first year of employment with the state, not necessarily here, with the state. Because if they served 8 months at NC State and then came here directly with no break in service, they would only have to serve 4 months because it's probationary with the state. The one difference for the year is actually, and this is obviously all student affairs, so the one difference is UPD, University Police Department, has a little different because of potential BLET, basic law enforcement training. So that could be extended. But that's a whole other thing you'll have to worry about. All right, so you need to do a documented quarterly review. And here's my advice. JJO. I love the looks people give when I do that. JJO, I can't even take credit for this. This came from our supervisor, Donna. It's kind of like JLo, but not quite. January, April, June, October. July, October. Reason why we say that is because those are the months you should be doing your performance reviews for your quarterly employees. January, April, July, October. Why? Because it falls in line with the actual performance cycle. Right? The annual is in April. So that would be a good time to do them. Now, you might ask, well, my employee was hired in February. What do I do? What's the first one you would do it in? April. Got it. See you following now. If an employee was hired in June, when's the first one that they would apply in? July. The reason being is because if you have multiple people you hire, let's say you hire somebody in January, February, March, you now have probationary reviews every single month, and it's hard to keep up with who you're reviewing. And then I get questions at the end of the year for the annual saying, I just did a probationary one in March. Why am I doing another one in April? Well, you have to do the one in April. That's state policy. So that's why I'm saying, whenever the employee's hired, just do it in January, April, July, October. Okay? Yeah, apparently shut the lights out on us.
Yeah, we're trying to just close it from us, so we're just doing our tweets.
Oh, okay. I was like, that's weird. All right, anyways, if anybody hears any loud screams, call for help. So, now the quarterly reviews are done just comment boxes. You're not going through, you're not doing any ratings, there are no calculations, it's just comments. And this is, you won't have to worry about this as EHRA, not faculty, because there's no probationary period. But now, if the employee, once again, has been with the university for at least 6 months, they will receive a full review in April. All right, so the weighting has to be 50%, 50%. None of us have the ability, even I as the coordinator, I can't change this percentage. 50% for institutional goals, 50% for individual goals. All right, individual goals, these are the most difficult ones to write. This is the most difficult part about doing a performance plan. And the reason why I do this now is because my advice is to have it ready April 1st for the employees so they're aware of it the entire year. However, state policy says you have 60 days to do it. My advice is doing it at least as quickly as possible. The individual goals are not supposed to cover the totality of the work. What covers the totality of the work, if anybody remembers? The job description, and that's also rated by the institutional goals. So the individual goals are the 3 to 5 things that are so important this year, we're pulling them out, and we're going to give them special consideration and more weight. And it's recommended sometimes if you have multiple people, let's say you have 3 different units who have 3 different groups of people who do the same job, for the managers, that management team of the 3 of them to sit down and talk and come up with like goals. We do this in housekeeping. We do this in Division of Comparative Medicine. We do it in a lot of different areas. Some places in facilities we do it. Makes it easier on the manager. And I'm going to speed through this a little bit because we do a full training on this called Performance Management Disciplinary Actions that we offer. It's a 3-day course, 3 half days. I highly suggest taking it if you can. But when I say individual goals by function, I want you to think of the what of the goal, okay? The what of the goal. What are we asking of the employee? Critical function, deal breaker. Let's say you have an audit coming, which I don't wish on anybody. Let's say you have an audit coming, all right? And my job has 10% of that is to do audit-related things. Guess what this year? It's going to be more important than the 10%, isn't it? So that's a great goal to write, okay? Things like that. Project-oriented. These are the most easiest to write. All right? These are, for instance, I have projects that have to do with creating a case management system for our unit. I have a project when it comes to going online for performance management. Those type of things are great projects, any type of project you might have coming through your unit. I know we talked about painting earlier. Our projects are, how about you paint the entire place within a year?
Exactly what mine is.
There you go. I had a feeling. So, like I said, you can have different ones like that. Stretch goals, these are the hardest because oftentimes you're focusing on the employee and not necessarily on the position. We're talking about the position in this instance. Okay, how do you stretch the position? How do you stretch the moving forward towards or to align to university strategic goals? When I say scope, I want you to think of the whom or the who of the goal. Who are we asking to do this? Okay? Division-wide. These are goals that are for a full division. I'll give you a quick example of a green goal that is a cascading goal that is a project. All right? So, everybody knows when I say green goal what that means, right? Yes, no, maybe conservation, that type of thing. Gotcha. All right, so let's say Chancellor Guskowitz decided, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go greener. I don't know, you probably wouldn't put it that way, but let's just say he did. All right, so then Vice Chancellor Dr. Becky Mangini, who is the Vice Chancellor for Equal Opportunity, or the Office of Human Resources and Equal Opportunity and Compliance, she says, all right, you know what? We're going to reduce paper waste. Okay? That's going to be our goal for all of OHR and EOC. So then AVC Lynx Butler, who is the head of HR, says, you know what? We're going to reduce paper by 20%. That would be for the entire division of OHR. That's the division-wide goal. Now, there's an individual in our group who does all of our IT work. If anybody does IT work, you know that you don't deal with paper very often. So would a paper reduction goal do anything for him? No. So based on his role, he might have a different type of reduction than everybody else. I would probably have the most because I kill a lot of trees with performance management, unfortunately, so I'm trying to get it online. So any questions about that? That gives you kind of, so it cascaded because it started at the top with Dr. Guskowitz and down. Okay? Work unit goals. These are things that for us could be training for our entire work unit. We all have to provide 6 trainings on campus and whatever after that we want to talk about. Employee-specific goals, these are, once again, we kind of talked about it. If you had an audit coming, right, and I do audit work, I'm the only person who does it, That's why it's employee specific to me. In the past, all the PM goals, I had all the performance management goals. Now Adele gets to share that with me. She looks thrilled. So when you write them, you want to write them smarter. Now, everybody's probably heard of SMART goals, right? But here at UNC, we do smarter. Specific. It's got to be specific. Remember, we talked about clarity a lot. It's got to be specific into what you want them to do. Why? Because the employee may not have a chance to, they may not be able to do what you're asking if they don't know what it is. Measurable. How are you going to measure it? It could be quantitative, it could be qualitative. Doesn't matter. It's got to be something, though. Another thing I want to make sure we're all understanding is that measure has to be accurate to the employee's performance. It can't be out here measuring somebody else's performance. Best training, we talk about Renee Rogers, and we talk about the fact that she had to process travel reimbursements within 5 days of the return date, travel return date. And we said, well, that's not actually measuring her. That's measuring people getting stuff to her. So we changed it to within 5 days of receipt of travel reimbursement. So your measurement needs to be accurate. Achievable, can be difficult, can be challenging. That's all well and good, but a reasonable person should be able to do it. Relevant, it's got to be relevant to the job. Can't be, I don't have a goal to come out here and do brain surgery. Be a terrible idea, I have really shaky hands. Also drink a lot of Diet Coke. Time bound. Now, inherently, there is a time bound nature to this. What is it? It's called the cycle. If there's an end date to the cycle. However, managers always ask me, it's so difficult for me to write the next year's performance plan because I don't know if they've actually completed this year's performance plan until it's over, and then I got to write it. Well, here's an idea. Don't wait till the end of the cycle. You can make sure the employee knows that you need to get this done by March 1st. That's the deadline. So now you have the entire month of March to evaluate if they did it, which means that by April 1st, you should have a performance plan ready for them for the next year. You can do that. Expectations. Should be ethical. If it's not ethical, you'll see me in a different context, and it's not going to be fun. But exciting and enjoyable. Those are things you might not have expected to see. And here's a little armchair psychiatry. People do what they want to do and what they enjoy doing, right? So if you have somebody who enjoys doing something, I enjoy doing trainings. I don't know why. I might have dropped on my head as a kid. But I enjoy getting up and talking to people. But that doesn't absolve the rest of our team from doing it, okay? So just because I enjoy doing it, that doesn't mean that Adele and the rest of our team don't have to come out and do training just because I enjoy it. The reason being is if I take on all the trainings and I still have the rest of my job, even if I give up something, we can't guarantee that it's equal. So now I might be feeling like, okay, for the first year I really enjoyed it. And then all of a sudden now I feel like I'm being taken advantage of because I'm doing so much, I feel like I'm doing more than other people. And we don't want that to happen. So that's why we don't want to take things away from other people just because somebody enjoys doing it. Last one's resources. Number one resource you have is time. These 3 to 5 goals are representing 50% of the entire year score of the employee. So if you have this goal, you do not give them the time to accomplish it, I'm going to question the manager and say, why was it so important in the first place? You didn't give them time to do it. Okay, so that's a big thing. Now, you may have changing philosophies. New supervisor come in, change the direction. Then we need to update the goals. Fix that. Yeah, I don't know what I'm writing about. So normally we do an exercise. We definitely do not have time for that today. So I just want to touch real briefly on the off-cycle reviews, interim reviews. If you have anybody who is rated not meeting on any goal, individual or institutional, they are required to have a interim review or mid-cycle review in October. By October, I think 31st is the last date in October. This year, we are tracking that. Barbara will have a sheet that I'll send to her that she has to send back to me once all reviews have been completed. In which case, she's going to write down everybody who has a rating of not meeting. I can see the overalls. I can't see the individuals. And so we're going to track and make sure that gets done. So just so you know, that has to get done this year. The university has not done a great job at adhering to that. Employees can request a review anytime during the cycle as long as it's not 60 days from the previous cycle review. Okay, and they can do it once a year, and you, the supervisor, have to do it. Employees response, they can always respond at any time. I advise within 2 to 3 weeks of the review. because people get busy, forget about it, so we'll make sure we're doing that. But there is a box that needs to be checked, okay, that states that there is an attachment. And that's all we got. So any questions online or in person? No? 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 Everybody just want to leave?
Do we ever see the university, I do it for my staff,
Mhm.
give them the opportunity to evaluate me, to give me feedback?
So you're looking at more of like a 360 review?
Right.
We have programs through Organization and Professional Development. It's costly, I'm not gonna lie to you, but we have not gotten to the point yet. Maybe when we go online, there is a component of the online vendor we're looking at that could potentially do something like that, but we have to make sure we're very careful in how we roll that out. Because, like I said, we wanna make sure that we're doing something that's value added. But I like that. And the question was, do we ever have anybody or allow for reviews of the supervisor? Any questions?
Well, I do want to thank everyone who has joined the session. I want to thank also Tyler in particular for being here, as well as Rebecca and Barbara, who have been helping provide the technical support for today. If you have any questions, please follow up with, you have many resources in student affairs, including your HR representatives, Barbara Lassane, myself, your department heads. Please follow up with any of those individuals if you have questions. I wish you the best in terms of for the performance review cycle this year, and I hope you have a good rest of your day and a nice rest of your spring break. Greetings, and thank you for taking the time to review the training session we provided for supervisors earlier this spring. At that time, we invited all supervisors and employees in student affairs to attend the training sessions, and we recorded the presentation so we could send it for reference as we began the performance review process. As mentioned by Interim Vice Chancellor Sauls, the performance review process is one of the most important professional development activities we conduct in student affairs. Feedback from the recent climate assessment indicated an interest in providing annual performance review training for supervisors. We took this suggestion one step further to include all employees in student affairs so everyone could hear the same information and expectations. We invite your comments regarding the training provided this year, and you are welcome to reach out to me or your respective HR representative if you have any questions. Thank you for your extra time and commitment to the performance review process.